Delighted to welcome all of you to the panel, representing a cross-section of mining industry stakeholders. Together, we're going to discuss the future of mining industry. So, Cleve, Ippei, and Damien, I really appreciate you joining us today at Inspirations. Before we get started, I would like the panel to introduce themselves, if I may, and if I can start with Cleve yourself, and then Ippei, and then Damien, please.
Thank you, Sam.
Yes.
Good morning or good afternoon to you. I was originally formed as a metallurgical engineer. I've been in the mining industry for just over 30 years now. I've been very fortunate to have a thread of technology, strategy development and implementation running throughout that career. So in many ways, I've been trying to figure out how we can actually transform the way we are mining. I've been in Chile for the last 20 years. I work in BHP looking after innovation in mainly our copper business. And that's where certainly I came across Sam with IntelliSense when our paths crossed here some 3-4 years ago now. That all forms part of innovation and technology development, and I really enjoy these sort of sessions, collaboration, and what I really enjoy is seeing other members out of the ecosystem sitting around the same panel to be able to discuss this topic today, Sam.
Thank you, Cleve. Ippei, if I may.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Ippei Akiyoshi, working in Mitsubishi Corporation. In Mitsubishi Corporation, I'm in charge of CVC activity, representing Mineral Resources Group. In Mineral Resources Group, we are doing the business of the trading and the investment to the mining assets. And to bring the value of innovation, we are doing investment to the technology company, including startups who has a novel technology which can be related to the mining operation. And today I'm joining this event to bring the perspective from the investor side in the mining industry. And yes, very pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ippei. Damien, please.
Yeah, so hello, everybody. My name is Damien Cabbie. I'm working at BASF. I'm the Senior Vice President in charge of Oilfield and Mining Solutions. I'm actually of a rare breed of French mining engineers, and I was fortunate to do a big portion of my career in mining in a small specialty minerals company called Ippei until I joined BASF 4 years ago, and I've been leading that group since then. This group is essentially supplying chemical solutions for the processing of ores to the mining industry, focusing on hydrometallurgy and tailings management, and also a bit more recently, very focusing a lot on expanding the product portfolio, leveraging the entire chemistry of BASF for the mining industry. And we've made a lot of developments in the areas of flotation, heap leaching, and that made us actually meet with IntelliSense a few years ago. And very, very happy to join Sam and the team and the rest of the panel here to talk about how important digitalization is important for us.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's just dive straight in. We've heard from various industry analysts over the past years about the mining industry's need to change. And, there are lots of technology-driven solution options that are always put on the table. But I think, one of the things we should do before we go into solution, one of the things I wanted to get from the panel was, I wanted to take a step back and ask ourselves the core question of why do we need to change, and bring in the different perspectives of the drivers to change. So with the operator hat on, if I may throw that question over to Cleve yourself as to what do you think are the imperatives for this change?
Thank you, Sam. That's a great question. If I look back at particularly in copper, but it extends to a number of the other commodities within mining. Fundamentally, the technologies which we are using today haven't changed since about 1920. And so what we've done in between is we've made them bigger, better, and more efficient. And we've done a good job at that. The thing which we haven't really focused on is how the context in which we operate has changed, and is changing every day more and more rapidly. And that context I put in two levels. There's the global context where we think of global economy, we think of things like acidification of the oceans, climate change. And then we look at more territorial type contexts, more directly where we work, like the local community, the aquifers we draw our fresh water on, the regional government, things like that. Those are all changing, and they're changing really, really fast. And the expectations around that are really, really changing. And so but we're dealing with technologies and processes which were developed more than, well, let's say 100 years ago. And so they aren't actually they aren't actually apt for what comes next. And so we really need to look at changing and upgrading so that we can be like that going into the future.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that is something which we've observed as well, being a new entrant into the industry. And I think if I can look at this imperative of change from an investor perspective, right, Ippei, you make all these investment decisions relevant for the industry. What is your context view around this whole macro context of mining industry's change drivers?
Yes, thank you, Sam. I really agree with what Cleve mentioned already. So, meaning global trend to respect environmental value is growing and expected to be more influential to the corporate activities in the mining space in the future. And with that global trend, continuing conventional way of mining business just means high risk of business continuity. About mining companies, expectations from all the stakeholders, including local community, are changing. So creating good economic value is not enough. To be in good shape, mining company needs to show that they are responsible and caring about the environment. And I think mining has not been consumer-oriented business in the past. But for example, now the big company, the influential company like Tesla, Apple are talking about the importance to think about where the material utilized in their product come from, or in what kind of operation that material is produced. And they are talking about aluminum, nickel industry. So in this case, we are indirectly exposed to that kind of consumers' consciousness, the awareness of the environmental value, and that's attracting the customers. So this is imposed us to think more seriously about how to change, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I think the consumer angle aspect of this driver for change is going to become more and more profound, as we see as well. And maybe I can segue to Damien, from your experience, what do you see as the drivers here?
Yeah, so let me build a little bit on what both Cleve and Ippei said, and maybe give a bit of our experience as both a supplier of materials to the battery, to the e-mobility industry, and as a supplier to the mining industry. And to start, I'll get back to the environmental sustainability, but I'll start by just the very important changes that are happening in that the trend to e-mobility is bringing to the demands on the mining sector. We see that, again, both as a supplier to the mining sector as a supplier to the battery industry, there is tremendous changes in the nature, the quality of the metals that are going to be required for the world, which in itself is a major driver for change, but also the level of uncertainty and the size of the bets that are being made in this industry is tremendous. And that's of course, has tremendous implications on the investment budgets of the mining companies, and creating not only that ability to respond to demand, but also that flexibility that is required depending on which direction, which technology ends up prevailing, and at which speed it gets implemented, is a major driver for change from our perspective, from what we can see, with probably also positioning in the value chains that are going to evolve. I mean, of course, we're hearing about Tesla investing in mining. It's not only an anecdote. I mean, there is a lot of things happening throughout the industry that go along those ways. And then, of course, the fact that, as Ippei said, that this is giving a different exposure to the overall public to mining is an important topic. And I would like to say here that I think the mining industry came to that realization a bit later than other industries, but we're definitely seeing the impact. We're seeing the impact after some of the big environmental disasters that happened in the past few years. We're also seeing it as a response to the current trends in climate change and also sensitivity to social and environmental topics. I just wrap it up probably by saying that I mean, in the 2000s, there was an important change in demand in rare earth. And we all know how that demand was fulfilled by developing quickly in China mines under conditions which sometimes are a bit questionable. I just don't think that we're going to provide the nickel, the copper, the cobalt for the e-mobility the same way that 20 years ago, the industry was able to react. And I think that's the big driver for change overall, from my perspective.
Mm. It's interesting, you know, from our perspective, just to add to another driver that we see is we're also seeing a lot of the next generation of miners who are entering the industry. They are actually becoming a vocal proponents of this change to be able to mine in a more sustainable and environmentally sustainable way. They're also looking for kind of a different systems, which has got, you know, access to information is far more real time. They can make decisions based on data. And this is also, we're seeing that acting as a big driver for the industry to look at different ways to operate. Now, you know, we all know that changing a legacy industry is very difficult, you know. So as I go around talking to different clients, you know, one of the things I always encounter, people ask me is, you know, how do you change? You know, what does change look like? How can we get started? You know, so I was thinking, what is the panel's thoughts about this, what we call experience of change? You know, from your experience within the industry, you know, how would you characterize what the industry is doing today, and you know, how should they react to this change that is coming down the line? So actually, you know, I would like to start with the investor perspective on this, because the investor community has been a big driver of this change. So Ippei, if you can let us know, what do you think as one of these change, what is this experience of change? That would be interesting.
Yes, thank you, Sam. As Mitsubishi is not necessarily the operator in a mining space, so I would like to start with the example which I see in a venture capital space. I think here innovation is the key. However, the adoption speed of new technologies in mining has been very slow. As a nature, I think mining company are risk adverse. And when it comes to new technology, it's very clear. The trend is very clear. And we always say in a venture capital space, everyone in mining, everyone wants to be fast, to be second to utilize new technology in a commercial operation. And compared to oil and gas, it's clear that open innovation is behind in mining, but change is coming, I think. And we are seeing more mining CVC, for example. And in terms of sense of urgency and the incentive to change, I think in addition to major mining company, mid-size mining company can play more role to accelerate the adoption speed and the pace of innovation, because many of them don't have their own R&D organization for the technology who are in charge of innovation. And it might be an advantage to have more incentive to actively engage in open innovation in some respect, in some aspect. And of course, I think big mining company already playing very important role. Picking up the example of, for example, Expand in Chile or Mining Hub Brazil. But I would like to expect the more mining company, including mid-size or small size mining company, can do that more actively.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think, this is where, Damien, your experience from other industries who have gone through that transition and what you are saying across the industry would be quite insightful here for the audience here. What do you think,
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a half full, half empty glass, I guess, in my experience in mining. I think in principle, or if you look at what mining does, the activity of mining, this is an area, this is an activity where there is tremendous change. There is change every day. Every, bucket load of ore that is being dumped into the process is different than the previous one and the next one. And as much as you start, as good as your block model is, you never know exactly what you're feeding into your plant. So I think from a day-to-day perspective, the change is just very much intrinsic to the way a mining operation works. On the other hand, it's true that this, what Ippei was saying, this rush to be second and this reluctance to change is definitely a very important feature of this industry. And I guess it probably means that every significant step change is something that makes the industry very concerned. Whereas smaller changes, more incremental changes are things which are much more natural and much more common in the industry. And we've had a lot of examples, a lot of great successes going through these types of incremental changes with our customers. And that's what we do all the time. Now, coming back to the comparison, I like the comparison that Ippei made shortly on with the oilfield industry, which also has significant risk associated with change. The cost of a well, if you plug it or if you screw it up, is quite large. So we're talking about the same impact of a failed change. In our experience, and I can really speak here by experience personal, because I'm in charge of both businesses for BASF, mining and oilfield, is that there is much more willingness to take a risk, a contained, concerted risk in oilfield, sometimes to a fault, I guess, in the case of oilfield, where people don't really know what it's going to do, but okay, let's try it, compared to mining, where we really were in the process of implementing, of introducing to the market quite important new technologies, breakthrough technologies, and we're really seeing this reluctance compared to oilfield, and this reluctance to even take a calculated risk. I think there is definitely something here to be reflected upon by the industry, especially given the pace and the size of the needs for change that we discussed just before.
Very interesting. Cleve, you've been hearing all these different perspectives, and being the operator in the room. What did you have to say? What is your perspective on this?
Look, I agree with Ippei's and Damien's comments. To me, the big challenge has been no real burning platform. So, and this is particularly true for the bigger mining operations, because they tend to have really good resources which can weather ups and downs. I think that's also where, quite rightly, Ippei says the smaller operations have a larger role to play. And I think if we look at the ecosystem, for example, in Australia, and the rise of the met sector there and how robust that has become in terms of its contribution to Australia, it's got to do with lots of little operations with people who've been well developed, professionally in some of the bigger mining companies, and we've got a burning platform because they're a single operation. They need to do something. But it doesn't mean we don't change. So I've been fortunate to actually experience both positive change and ones where we failed along the line. And there's probably a few things which are common. And I should maybe just say, while I've experienced that, I think the real challenge we've got is we don't do it consistently. So we're pretty ad hoc about this. So in nearly every single case, there's strong leadership. And I think what we're seeing in the world, and the conversation, the question prior of why we need to change, the whole change in our investors who represent not just our shareholders, but a broader portion of stakeholders, speaking about environmental sustainability and governance issues or ESG issues, means that the leadership in most of the mining companies have actually really stepped up and said, look, we need to do something in this space, because previously they would ask us about earnings forecast. Now they're asking about what we're doing on the ESG levels. And so if we want to be a sustainable business in the future, in all senses, both financially as well, a social license, environmental and that, we need to be able to figure this out. So strong leadership always creates a good space for this to happen. And that doesn't necessarily have to be at the senior leadership level. That always helps, but certainly on a more local level, that is even more important, because many times what happens is you can have something coming down as a mandate from above, but then it gets lost in sort of middle management. So having strong alignment with that policy. And so I think their purpose and linking that to the vision and what we're trying to do is very, very important. We in BHP, for example, recently taking all these different influences and voices in, we came up with a new vision statement, which is or purpose statement, which is about bringing people and resources together to build a better world. And that's wonderful, because it actually starts changing our paradigm and actually how we go about things. The other thing which is really important in change is how we actually build a social capital around what we're trying to do. And social capital, what do I mean by that, is how do I get the attention of someone who's trying to run a concentrator day in, day out, hit his or her targets. But I now want to go in and upset the apple cart by trying to introduce something. I need to take them on the journey. And this concept which Damien put across so well about the little iterative things, we're great at building big infrastructure projects. We need to learn to how we can actually figure out taking little bites and transform through little bites. And so accept the ambiguity and and risk associated with those things in bites, which we can actually manage and go through that. And I think that pays really well for, like what you guys are doing, bringing in the industry 4.0 technologies, which is all around iteration. And I think if we look at, what the creative industry and that do in terms of design thinking, using design thinking concepts of empathy, in other words, getting everyone together, building that social capital, understanding truly what the problem is, and then working through the solutions in iterative processes, those are patterns which I've seen associated with successful change. Where it's failed, they don't have them.
That's very interesting. We at IntelliSense, when we were one of the early champions of what is called the lean startup movement, and that movement was effectively based on the basic premise was that we need to understand the end user's problems really well before you even write a line of code or before you build any technology. And how do you then work with the end user to give incremental value delivery? And that has been really successful for us because we have been on a journey with the end user over the years. And yes, there has been lots of lessons learned, but there has been a lot of successes as well. Because, as coming from a technology startup environment, we have seen so many companies and technologies fail when you actually start with an idea for a product and you spend months, years building that product, because by the time you get it out, the market has moved. So we have been really encouraged recently, actually, over the last 12 to 18 months. We've seen the industry take on agile delivery quite a lot. There is a lot of work going on in big mining corporations around how do you create this kind of a 2-weekly sprints? How do you get things out in front of the users, get their feedback, and then go back again? So that is quite a good sign that the industry is now adopting the software industry's way of working, which is, bite-sized chunks, which delivers value for the end user, but then also gets the feedback in, and you keep on going in the loop. So, I guess the sentiment that I'm getting from all of you is, innovation is absolutely critical for us to be able to, for the industry to be able to experience or move forward with that change. Now, I'm pretty sure, there are a lot of people here in the audience today who have heard this and understanding the innovation. But one of the biggest questions I always get is, where can you start? What are the concrete next steps that we can take as a mining company to get on that journey, get started on that journey? And especially with the COVID world that we are going to experience, with a lot of remote working, a lot of less people on site, how can we get things going? So I think in here, Damien, from a BASF, with the BASF hat on, you're the best person to get this part of the conversation started as to where can the journey begin for most people.
Yeah, so I think, and I guess there's two questions about your question overall, is how to start the journey of innovation, and then how to do it in the COVID environment. But to start with where to start the journey, I think it in our experience, it really starts with understanding of the situation of the mine and really diving into the reality of what's the challenge. And that's all very much data-based. That's all related to facts that tend to be more difficult to gather on the mine side than they are in other industries, which may be more stable in the way they operate. And I really believe, and that's actually the reason we believe at BASF, and that's the reason behind our partnership with IntelliSense, that we can really accelerate that initiation and make it much more effective by leveraging the power of digital. You can have much easier access to the data. You can make simulations, which actually I think help address the concern that I shared before, and that Cleve also pointed to, which is this risk concern. If you can run scenarios, if you can put boundaries, if you can try to see what could happen worst case on a computer versus trying it in the real life, you really have a very powerful tool to enable digitalization, to enable innovation. And I think it also helps create a platform for information sharing, which opens the way to much more open innovation models, which accelerate the pace of innovation, make sure that there is a common understanding of what works, what doesn't work, what's the situation, and maybe also helps address orphan topics. I'll just give you just an illustration on this. We have, out of all the ideas that come, of innovation ideas that we do, I mean, at BASF, we're really, I mean, our mandate is to innovate, to create chemistry for a sustainable future. So we're really focused on coming up with new ideas. But out of all these ideas, of all these opportunities that come out of our regular contacts with the mine sites, many of them we end up not pursuing, not because we couldn't find a good solution, not because there isn't a need, but because the typical model of interaction where the supplier comes with a reagent and which is sold to a customer just doesn't create an opportunity for value creation. And I think by leveraging the power of digital here, you can actually also develop new business models, which may make innovation, a lot of innovation ideas that are not very complex to develop from a technical perspective, meaningful from an economic perspective.
Okay, yeah, that's so so if I look at those innovations and some of the investment decisions that we are making today with an eye to encourage innovation, so Ippei, you are making those decisions today. What kind of steps do you feel the mining companies, individuals in the mining company needs to make today so they can leverage the value of these innovations?
Yes, I think one answer is to improve the readiness or accelerate the adoption speed of the value of innovation. Because I think the challenge being faced with mining industry are not the easy ones, meaning that we need to improve the efficiency of the operation utilizing the power of digitalization and automation. And even in the case to solve some specific pain point in the industry, I think only miners or mining company can have a success only by themselves. Meaning that I want to say that sometimes the outsiders outside of the mining industry, they can bring very fresh ideas, new ideas, or new technology as enabler to kill the pain points of the industry. And that can be created in the collaboration with outsiders. So that's open innovation. And I want to introduce one example of our portfolio companies. The company achieved the great success in the space of hydrometallurgy, the leaching the copper from the copper ore, which was seems to be unleachable. But the two founders, nothing to do with the mining experience, came into the space and started thinking about what kind of approach they can take to solve that pain point. And they made a great achievement in the space. And quick adapter of that technology are now enjoying the value of the innovation as being a quick mover, the fast adapter. But we do see the tendency in a big mining company to be very conservative before trying the new technology. So I want to say that the common sense in mining is not necessarily good or beneficial for the innovation to come. So ideas from the other industry can play more role here, including digital technologies. So yeah, adoption speed of the benefit of innovation might be the key here.
That's quite a powerful statement, Ippei, and I guess the sentiment that I also get is, open innovation is going to be the driver that will help. So finally, to cap it out, Cleve, as one of the majors in the room, what is your counsel as to how can people start today and have a clear vision of where they're going to go?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. I think if you look at many operations in the mining industry, you find them opportunity rich. So the biggest favor any miner can do is understand what the opportunities or problems are, and more important than anything, prioritize them. So understand where you want to start. Boiling the ocean doesn't work. You very quickly get frustrated. But more than you getting frustrated, you don't actually send the right signal out into the ecosystem about what you really want to work on and what's important for you. Because there are lots of suppliers, startups, entrepreneurs trying to get in and sell their products. And many of them are very, very valid products. So ranking your opportunities, very, very important. and then understanding that problem or that opportunity so you can actually communicate it well. What I've found is that one of the biggest gaps we've got, and it's not just to the external environment, it's also in the internal environment, is the asymmetry of knowledge or understanding which sits around a problem or opportunity. And as I think Ippei mentioned, the world we're living in, a lot of the problems are multidimensional. They need a much broader aspect and reflection on to find the set of solutions which we can actually look at deploying there. And so being able to articulate that and get everyone to a sort of threshold level of understanding, to me, is absolutely important. Mm-hmm. Open innovation, absolutely agree with. Yeah, in Chile, we've been running an open innovation process for the last 17 years or so, all about doing just what I've just said. Very important that we can call on other industries, as Ippei was saying, call on startups, entrepreneurs, people with different backgrounds over there, recognize from an ego point of view that we don't necessarily have the solution. That solution can sit outside. As we go through this, we try and become a bit bigger and bolder in how we go about this. The thing about speed to market is an interesting one. Solvent extraction, electrowinning in copper was something we adopted from the uranium industry back in the 60s. It took 25 years for it to become a proven technology. We will be out of business if we keep up with that rate. And so for one example, on trying to change that, our BHP Tailings Challenge, which is a crowdsourcing challenge to look at how to repurpose our mine tailings, so repurpose rather than reprocess. So turn it into a raw material for another product, for another industry. There we've actually put a 2-year limit on to try and get to something which we could ultimately scale and commercialize. Then the other thing I think which we also need to take into account is that it's not just about technology and widgets and things like that. We also need to change our concept of the business model and move away from the transactional type business model like we were really fixed in the past. Because if you look back at new innovations, new technology and how they've been implemented, successful ones have always been accompanied by an innovative business model to accompany them, to actually permit them and give them space. So that's another space which we can sit and work in. And I think what Mitsubishi, for example, are doing is great because they're starting to experiment with these different ways of going about it, are investing and developing technology, and that helps as a vehicle for these things to move forward. So those are some of the things which we can do and we need to do.
Great. And as one of those entrepreneurs and bringing technology from other sector into the industry, if I look at all of our customers that we are working with right now, and they're looking at their digital transformation, and what we find is the vision they're driving is they have 3 core themes that drive these initiatives. One is about this need to become more agile in their decision making across their operations. And that driver within this kind of a dynamic operational changes that is happening. And of course, then that is mixed with the need to become like a remote first environment. And finally, what we see is they are really focused on building social capital in the front line with their operators about this new technology, engage them early on in the project so that they get their buy-in, they get their feedback. So by the time they are looking at the product, it has baked in all the things that they have been looking for or where the gaps are. So it kind of, and ultimately it's all about, we find this new technology is about building trust and transparency across the organization. And that's the core message that, from our perspective, I would give to the audience here today. So I understand, we're kind of getting out of time on this conversation. So we need to there's lots of questions coming along. So we need to do a Q&A. I appreciate all of you taking the time, all of the great partnerships that we have with yourself and your organizations. And we really look forward to working together in supporting the industry going through this transition. So with that note, I would like to take a few of the questions that has been coming along. So let me take one of them first. Is this is a question for you, Cleve. One of the questions from the audience is, we've heard of the pressures to change for the mining industry before. Why is it different this time? What would you have to say, Cleve, on that?
Look, there's compelling evidence that the planet's under stress. Climate change, water resources. In many places as well, there's growing discontent, social discontent, and certainly here in Chile, we've just celebrated our first anniversary of a massive social voice in looking at driving change. And so it's not just impacting us, it's impacting everyone. And we need to play our part in this. You mentioned something which is very relevant as well. We're also going through a generational change. The kids coming in today who are investors, but not only invested, are also our employees. So another stakeholder of ours, they also want change, and they also want to work in a different way. And so all these things coming together create a storm, which our generation needs to figure out. And it's, to be relevant, we need to do that now.
Okay, that's great. That's great. I think there's another interesting question. It's a bit of a crystal ball question, and question to you, Ippei. As a major investor in the industry, how do you foresee the kind of the next 10 years? Where will the industry be with respect to these innovations and adopting this open innovation?
Yes, very difficult question, Sam. It's very difficult to say how it's going to be in 10 years. But what I can say here is that definitely the criteria for the mining investor will be dramatically changing in these 10 years, meaning that the economic value in the short term will not be the only criterion for the decision making for us, for the mining investors, definitely. For example, who thought that carbon credit will be important issue for the economic decision 10 years ago, for example? I don't think someone expected that will affect that strong as it does now. So thinking about, for example, criteria of the selection of the operation will change dramatically from the miners' decision making too. For example, in Chile, as a major copper mining country, we used to use the natural water, but it's currently very difficult to do that. If we need to increase the consumption of the water usage, we need to construct the desalination plant and construct the pipeline with the huge capex amount. And talking about the power resource, we used to use a fossil fuel, but now we are transforming very dramatically, very rapidly to the renewable energy, including hydrogen. So environment is changing dramatically in that way. So I think, for example, the selection or the strategy to pursue the bigger opportunity, I don't think that will last that long. Miner wants to seek more different opportunity, like tailings reclamation, for example. That can be with the environmental value advantage, for example. That's something I speculate. Foresee.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's interesting. I can see there are lots of questions coming in. One of the questions that we have also is, what role will the industry suppliers will play in supporting this efficient and sustainable mining industry that we're all really invested in to build? And that's a question to Damien yourself, with the BASF hat on. What do you feel? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely a lot of different responses to this question, and I think it's up to every supplier to respond. What we can probably tell you more precisely is what we believe as BASF and how we are trying to position ourselves to support an efficient mining industry. And I think here, rebounding on Cleve's comment around the business models, I think we've really made a strong and I think very courageous decision to make a shift in paradigm. It hasn't been a revolution. It's been more of a gradual, but very steady, very determined shift in paradigm, where we don't see ourselves as a supplier of chemicals. We really see ourselves as an enabler of performance to our customers. I think it starts by having efficient products, proposing efficient product, proposing innovative, efficient products. It goes then by moving toward what we call solutions, which is being very engaged with the mine site, to the point that I think we made a survey, and I recently in all the specialty chemical businesses of BASF, and we found out that mining solutions was one of the most engaged team with their customers, not in the sense of qualifying a product, doing formulation support, but also really in many cases being an integral part of how the operation makes decision to make sure that they keep that they stay at the top of their performance. And I think the last step that we made, I mean, which is not the last, but the most recent step actually, is what we did together, what we announced last summer, Sam, where we're now saying, well, we'll include a digital dimension to what we supply. We're going to apply to propose a digital offering in itself, which essentially means that we look forward to selling less chemicals in a much more efficient way. And this is why I'm saying it's quite a bold move and a courageous move, because we know in the short term it's not going to help offtakes, and conveying the message to the industry that we are going to use less of our products and we still need to figure out a way to make money is a challenge. But we're really committed and convinced that this is the path that this industry is going, and we'd rather be proactively addressing it. It's the same, I think, also with the commitment to sustainability, which goes for a long time. And we've also had a few difficult experiences. I have to say, a lot of our most sustainability-driven products are not the ones that are selling best yet. But I think that having that and being able to engage in a dialogue across the industry and providing support at the appropriate time to our customer base is really the best way we can do to support this industry. And we're really committed to it and looking forward to it. And everything we said about the changes coming, I think for me is really comforting us in the fact that we're taking the right steps.
Great. I mean, that's a very powerful statement, Damien. But I guess the common thread there is, digital transformation has quite a core role to play in order to make this transition, to support the industry on making that transition and make it fit for the future. And Inspirations today is all about digital transformation. It's all about we are sharing what we heard from the industry and how we as the IntelliSense.io are committed to supporting the industry with this digital journey that people are on. And it starts with the data and it builds on from there. So, it's an open question. I think maybe I'll start with Cleve. From your vantage point and your experience, what do you see as how digital transformation will support that the industry's transition that we have been talking about for the last 45 minutes?
Sam, when you've been in the industry as long as I have, you would have experienced the same problem being solved, only to pop up maybe 5-6 times. And I think that's part of what has been holding the industry back and actually moving forward in terms of productivity levels and that. And this has got this is no reflection on our colleagues who work in operations and that, but the demands which are put on them to keep an operation safe, stable, are tremendous. And as we spoke before, with all these additional dimensions, it's really tough. So the only way we can actually take that step change and keep things stable is by using the power of digital technologies. And so there's a huge capability and potential in that space to actually form that platform for the next generation of miner. And so that's what we're betting on. You know, it's going to help us move into manufacturing like levels of performance. It's going to tease out those elements of value which have been hidden because of all the other noise which have been happening. And it's going to keep our people a lot safer.
So very powerful. I mean, it's all about sustainability, efficiency, and safety. And finally, to you, Ippei, to close down this Q&A session, is you know, you are also making those investment decisions on digital technologies. So, and I'm pretty sure that your thesis also has a core element where digital makes an impact on mining's future to make it fit for future. What is your final words as you close down this Q&A?
Yes, Sam. I think digital related technology is great foundation, and also it's a great enabler to make many positive change possible in a mining space. But it's very broad range, so it quite depends on miners how to utilize it, on what purpose to utilize it. So talking about digital twin, just having digital twin is just a replication of what's happening in the real space with the VR basis. But by having digital twin, what kind of optimization we would like to implement, or maybe we can utilize it to show the mining operation to the local community or many stakeholders, to the investors. So the usage is in multiple directions. So we need to be very creative how to utilize the digital related technology to realize the specific value in the many directions. That's the key thing to think about.
Okay, I see there's a lot of questions coming. So Damien, so there is a question for you, which I think is come from the audience very much, which is, what does BASF see in partnering with an AI software solution like a potential like IntelliSense.io? You know, what is the synergy that the audience wants to know from you? What do you see there?
Okay, I guess it's a question for both of us, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I mean, to put it simple, I think we believe that creating clarity about how the operation works and supporting our customers operating efficiently is the core of our purpose. And we think that doing it only with the tool of chemicals is not sufficient, and that it needs to come with the tool of digital. And then we thought, okay, do we want to develop our own tool that's going to provide clarity, that's going to put all our little tricks on how to optimize a plant and etc. And then we thought, well, actually, that may not be the best way to go, because then, you know, the supplier of another chemical, the supplier of, you know, whatever you want to call, I mean, different supplies or equipment manufacturer is going to have the same claim, and it's going to become a mess for the operations. And we started to look for a more holistic solution, and which I think is just a way to a proof or manifestation of our mindset of, we just want to provide what's best for the plant. And to do that, we need to be able to provide the full plant view. And then we came across IntelliSense, and we really liked very much that what you guys are doing is dedicated to the mining industry. We were quite impressed when we ran a few pilots, when we opened the hood a little bit together and found out what you were doing. And we actually together thought that the fact that BASF has a unique network across the world of people who day in, day out call on mining sites, that we are present everywhere where there is a mine and not everywhere where there is, a consumer. So we're very close to mine sites. We tend to be remote, and that we are in the middle of the kind of operational challenges of our customers, at least the ones with whom we have the best relationship. That could be of value for IntelliSense in the sense that we could really together bring the power of AI that IntelliSense brings, and bring the experience and the understanding of the operating conditions of the mine and provide a unique solution. We're already operating this business as a separate business within Mining Solutions. This is not, the purpose of our partnership is not to sell more chemicals, as I said, and the purpose of chemicals is not to sell digital. Where we think the two have a different path, but of course they can help each other. And if by an implementation of one of the IntelliSense apps, I can prove that the application of a recommendation by a chemical specialist of BASF is going to be creating value, then it's fantastic. And if by reviewing how the application of a chemical works, I can actually make sure that I provide visibility, optimization, remote access, visibility to the broader biotope that is supporting the mine, then I think we've created value for the mine. So it's a bit unusual, but it's looking very promising. And I think the initial steps that we're making, Sam, are quite promising.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thanks, Damien. I mean, from our perspective, what I would say is, we get that operational context around the process, around the environment, for our AI models or even first principle models that BASF brings to us. And we really believe that combining those two gets the whole system acts as a massive competitive advantage. Because now here we are powering the whole data science and software engineering expertise into these models, and we are also infusing with the process knowledge and the underlying chemistry behaviors into that model. So we are able to give our predictions with the accuracy levels that's far more exciting. We're able to simulate the process behavior, and we're able to give better optimization recommendations, which at the end, it's all boils down to how we're able to partner with a mining organization in that digital journey. So we are really looking forward to working together on this. Now I'm being told that we are getting to a close. But there are lots of questions that I can see has come through. So just for the audience, we are going to capture all these questions. We are going to talk in the panel, and we are going to prepare the answers, and we will come back to all of you with answers to these questions. So please keep the questions coming, because we have a full day of different sessions where we'd like to see that activity going. With that, I would like to thank the panel for really taking the time from all over the world, and thank you very much.